Hey everyone, my name's Kelvin and welcome to my video tutorial for my Watercolor for Procreate kit. The first thing you want to do is just download the product itself onto your iPad. I recommend just going to Creative Market or whatever website you bought the add-on from. Go there on your iPad using Safari and just download it like that. And when it asks you where you want to save the file, just save it to your downloads folder. And then once it's finished downloading, just go to your file browser, that's this one down here. If you just open it up and you notice that the Recents tab is highlighted, go over here to Browse. Even though you might see the product file in the Recent, you can't really open files from the Recent tab. So go to Browse, and then go to the folder where you downloaded the add-on, in this case the Downloads folder. And then I'm going to look for it here, and it's this one, Watercolor for Procreate version 5.1. And in the future, I might change that last number there, but the process for all this will be exactly the same. So the product is inside a zip file, and to open up a zip file, just do a long click, and then go to Uncompress at the bottom of that menu there. It'll take a second to decompress it, and then once it's done, you can just tap on that folder to open it up. And inside there's a few different things. This one here with that potted plant, this is the paper texture, and that's really important. So to open that up in Procreate, just click it, and that'll take just a minute to import. And sometimes if you have a document open previously in Procreate, it might just open to that document, for example, this one. So you'll need to go to your gallery page, and then it will be the most recent one after it imports. So just click on that to open it up. And the next thing we need to load is the brushes. So I'm going to go back to the home screen, back to the file browser, and then it'll remember where we were before, and this is the brush file here, Aquarelle Brushes, brush set. So we'll just click that one to open it up in Procreate. And after it imports those brushes, you can find those by going to your brush panel and scrolling all the way to the top, and they'll be the most recent ones up here. So these are all the brushes that come with this kit, and it's a lot to choose from, but you really don't need them all. Maybe when I made this potted plant, for example, I probably used 3 of these brushes. So that's how you set everything up, and I'm going to show you how to paint a quick little cactus in a pot. So let's go to our Layers panel, and I'm going to hide the House Plant by Kelvin by unchecking that layer, and then I'll select any of the other layers up here. If you want to create more layers to paint on, you can just duplicate it, but make sure you're painting underneath the watercolor texture group. Everything down here will have the texture. If you make a layer above, it won't have the texture. And also, before I forget here, this very top layer, if you turn that one on, that's showing like a preview of what all the brushes look like and some of the things I like to use them for. But I'll turn that off. And I'm going to start by choosing a kind of a pretty neutral color. And then I'm going to go to my brush set here, and I'm going to choose the Abstract Round brush. And you'll notice you can change the size of the brush over here, but if the brush is really large and then you make a small brush stroke, you see the color is very dark. But if I press really hard, the color gets much fainter. So sometimes you might have a problem where you want to have this color variation, but you want it to be at a smaller scale like this. So what you do is you just need to shrink the brush a little bit. So when that's happening, you just need to shrink the brush. So if you're painting something and it's too dark, you need to shrink the brush. If you're painting something and it's too light, that means you need to make the brush a little bit bigger. So here we go, I've shrunk the brush, and now I can get that color variation you see on the big stroke, on the small stroke as well. Whereas before, it was just a solid color. So I'm going to clear this layer, and I'm going to paint a quick little plant pot here using the Abstract Round brush. And I'm going to use it pretty big because I don't want a lot of color variation in this pot. So we'll just do a quick little thing like that and color it in. Okay, another little layer on top. Every time you let off the brush and then use it again, it'll get a little bit darker. So if you want a consistent shape that's a consistent color, try to do it all in one stroke. Because if you lift the brush off and then go over it again, you'll have that layering effect. So I'm happy with this pot, but I want to blur it a little bit. I don't like this sharp boundary, so I'm going to use the water brush to do that. So go to the brush panel, and then scroll all the way to the bottom, and it's called the Water Blender brush. And we'll choose a scale that's suitable for this. I think that's fine. And then I'll just kind of tap it and swipe it, and it will sort of blend those colors in a pretty realistic sort of watercolor way. Okay, that looks pretty good. Just be careful not to go to the edge, because it will actually pull in the background in as well. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I want to add some subtle color variation to this pot. So I'm going to go to the selection tool, and I'll make sure it's set to freehand. That's the one where you can kind of draw a selection box. And I'll just randomly select a few areas. I'll feather it out a little bit just to soften that selection edge. I'll go to the magic wand, and I'll go to hue and saturation here. And I'm going to shift the color a little bit to magenta, I think. And I'll make it a little bit, maybe a little bit darker, but also a little bit more saturated. There we go. And I want to also add a little shadow to this pot. So I'll grab that selection tool again, and I'll just go like this. Just thinking like where, if I painted this with watercolor, where would I leave off the brush so that the pigment can kind of spread and make that area darker? So I've just selected this area here. I'll go to the adjustments again, hue and saturation, and I'll just darken that a little bit, just like that. And I like the hard edge. I didn't feather it. Sometimes in watercolor you have hard edges, and this water blender brush can smooth everything out, but I recommend leaving some hard edges because it's a really nice, realistic look when you have it that way. So let's zoom out here, and I'll grab the abstract round brush again. I'm going to make a new layer above the pot here, and I'm going to choose a nice green color. Something like that's good. And I'll just test it out here, just checking the size. And I'm just going to sort of make a brush stroke, and then I'm kind of pulsing it, like pressing it harder and softer and harder and softer. And I'm trying to get this kind of lumpy cactus look. And I want to add a cactus behind, one more behind in the middle. So I'm going to choose a darker color because it's in the background. And then I'm going to grab the selection tool. And this is just a quick trick that I use a lot when I want to add something behind what I've already painted without it doing that layering effect. Like if I just use the brush and I went over top of it, it's going to layer. So what I'll do is I'll grab that selection tool, go to automatic, and then I'll draw a line here and just try to select the very edge. I'm just making sure the edge of this is super, super clean. And then I'll go back to my brush tool. And then with the darker green, if I just paint behind it like that, you'll see it's like masking it almost. There, okay? And then I'll deselect that, grab the selection tool here and shrink this cactus just a little bit so it fits in that pot a little better. Now I'm going to shape the pot. So I'll go to the layer with the pot. I'm going to zoom in here, grab my eraser tool, and make the top a little bit smoother, make the sides kind of curving in. Maybe I'll add a little lip to the bottom there. There we go. And actually, because it has that lip, I want to add one more shadow. I'm just going to make a selection box. Whoops, I want to use the freehand one here, not the automatic. And I'll make a selection box just on the bottom, like that. And then I'll feather it up, sort of going up the curve of the pot. I'll grab my adjustment here, and I'll darken it a little bit. And when you darken something, it usually helps to saturate it as well. Just like that. Maybe we'll shift the color. A little bit more magenta, that's cool. There we go. Now I want to sort of erase the bottom of these cactuses. So I'll go back to the cactus layer, grab my eraser again, and just erase the bottom like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I want the cactus here to be sort of bleeding into the pot, because if you're doing this watercolor in real life, you don't have layers. Everything's happening on the same layer. So some of the colors will kind of mix together. So while I have the cactus layer selected, I'm going to grab the water blender brush. Make it pretty small like that. And I'm going to go like this here. Fade some of that color down. It's like I accidentally got a little bit too close with those colors. Just like that. So wherever the cactus is touching the pot, I'm bleeding it down. and then I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'll push back, and just kind of work this edge back and forth. And then at the very end, I'm going to make the brush here pretty small, and I'm just going to kind of do some scrubbing. As you know, when watercolor mixes together, it will often, it's not always smooth. Sometimes it makes these kind of veiny designs. So that's what I'm trying to replicate here, make it a little rougher. Okay, that's pretty good. Now I need to do the same to the pot, which is on a different layer. So let's go get the pot, grab that brush again, and now the pot layer is selected. I can sort of do the opposite and bleed the pot up into the cactus. And one thing I notice is this edge here of this cactus, it's a little bit weird because of that selection we did earlier. So I'm going to grab the cactus layer again, and I still have the water blender selected, and I'm going to use a pretty small size. I'm just going to draw over that sort of rough edge. It'll make it look a little bit more realistic, but don't forget to leave some of it open like that. You know, you don't have to do this effect on all the whole edge, because watercolor does have a lot of variations of how colors merge and how they mix together. So I guess that's one thing that's really important on the iPad. Is a good thing is you can always undo and you can always make everything perfect, but that's kind of a downside when it comes to watercolor, because you can get carried away making everything perfect, and then when you zoom out, it doesn't look like watercolor anymore. So leave your mistakes in there. Leave some of the unusual edges, and don't do everything exactly the same, because it does have a nice look when you sort of do it sort of naturally. Okay, and now I want to add a shadow on this cactus. So I'll grab that selection tool, make sure it's on freehand, and I'm just going to draw randomly kind of up here, and then I'll try to trace the edge of where they meet together, just like that. And then I'll go to the magic wand here, hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just darken that area of the cactus just a little bit. It's a really subtle thing. And I'll do the same thing over on this one. Here we go, brightness, lower that a little bit. There we go. It just adds this kind of depth to the paintings that I really enjoy. So this is almost done. I could add more detail to the cactus, but I think I'll just add like a little planter stand for it, and then that'll be it. I'll make a new layer, and I'm gonna select kind of a brown color. No, I need some more colors. There's too much brown in here. I'm gonna choose a blue, kind of a desaturated blue. Same thing. Again, I've pretty much done this whole painting with that one brush and that watercolor blender. And you'll have to experiment with these other brushes and what you prefer to use them for. So let's make the size pretty big, because like I said before, if you want there to be very little variation in the color, make sure the brush is big. For example, if I shrink the brush and I try to do the same thing, you'll see it's getting like fainter and lighter. If that's happening and you don't like it, it means you need to make the brush bigger. So let's make this pot stand here like that. That's pretty cool. I want to add some legs to it like that. And then there'll be the one leg kind of in the back there, so sort of foreshortened. And now I want to add a shadow in there. So I'll grab my selection tool, make sure it's on freehand, and then I'll do a selection, maybe something like, let's see here, like this. And I'm just catching the edge here. Yeah, sorry about all this. You don't have to do that. I'm just trying to select a little bit of this edge, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. And then when I darken it, you'll see what happens here. It sort of makes those legs kind of jump off, like there's some depth going on in there. So I'll go to my selection tool and deselect that. I want to blend this a little bit, so we'll grab the water blender and just sort of scrub around in there. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to get every single edge. It's okay to leave some hard edges. Go, just tap it a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, if I still have this layer selected, so if I grab the selection tool, I can move the whole plant stand. But you'll notice there's this kind of transparent effect going on. So I just want to set the plant stand like that, I think. And I need to erase the pot so it's not like overlapping anymore. So I'll go to that pot, grab my eraser tool, and I'll just go like this. And I like it when two shapes are coming together and there's a little bit of white showing through, because this happens when you're painting watercolor in real life. So there we go. I think this painting is done. So hopefully that's a pretty good overview of how you can use some of these brushes, and maybe I hopefully went into a little bit of the techniques that I use. Personally, I'm sure you'll have your own process, but this is just how I like to paint stuff. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave a comment on this video or send me an email directly. But other than that, guys, thank you so much for your support, and thanks for watching.